what do you think that Bo has improved on the most from like week one, out there in Seattle to what we saw against the Saints?
One of the things he's getting better at is picking his spots to be decisive about running the ball. Like, okay, it's not there. Boom, 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 go. I think even maybe the first play of the game was one of those where it was like, you look, you don't like it, you take off, you get 15 yards. I mean, that's a good way to go. They have a long way to go in the passing game. I mean, there's not a lot of stuff that you look at and say like, yes, consistently they're doing this very well. You have to learn how do you work around those inconsistencies early on. And one of the things I give him a lot of credit for is that he stays in the fight, he keeps going, he doesn't seem to let it affect him for more than a little while, and they're sort of like figuring out ways around it. So it's not always pretty, but they're 4-3, and that's a good way to be figuring it out rather than being 2-5.
Hello, and thank you for joining us here on Broncos and Bourbon. I am your host, Phil Milani. A little bit of a different show this week with the Broncos playing on Thursday Night Football. More of a recap show, getting some insight on what happened against the Saints. How did the Broncos, come out with that performance? 33-10, a beatdown of the Saints, and it wasn't even really as close as that score might suggest. So, the Broncos came out and took care of business on a short week, and we're going to recap it all and get into it with Parker Gabriel. He covers the Broncos for the Denver Post. He's around this team more than anybody. So he's there every single day, every single facet of the team. He's right there. A great writer and somebody that you should definitely be following if you're interested in this Broncos team. So we get into it. A lot of interesting stuff. What stood out to him about the win. Some good stuff, some interesting insight on how much this meant to Sean Payton. And then we, of course, talk about Bo Nix, him using his legs and why we could see a lot more of that for the Broncos offense here. We talk about the defense, and then I ask him, hey, what's realistic for this team this year? And I think that his answer might be encouraging for Broncos fans. So make sure that you check out the whole interview here. And then since this is a little bit of a different type of show, we'll make the nightcap a little bit different. We've reviewed 6 bourbons so far, and I'm going to rank them here today instead of tasting a new one. I'm going to tell you, okay, through these 6 bottles here, I'm going to rank them 1 through 6. And then, hey, if you haven't done so already, maybe this is a good weekend to go out and get a new bottle. So that's what we'll do for the nightcap. And it should be a good show. And I hope that you enjoy this interview here with Parker Gabriel. He covers the Broncos for the Denver Post. Parker, thanks so much for taking some time to join me this morning here. How's everything been going for you? How's the season been?
It's been good. It's crazy when you get to this point and, the Broncos are 7 games in now, 7 down, 10 to go, long way to go still, obviously, but you're just like, you get to a point where the weeks just sort of melt by and you look up and you go, oh, it's mid-October. That's strange. I thought it was still Labor Day weekend or something like that, So it's rolling now, man. We're in it.
I always felt like the longest stretch of the season was those couple of weeks, like right before Thanksgiving, because after Thanksgiving, you kind of see, some light at the end of the tunnel there. But like that stretch where you're just in the middle before Thanksgiving, you're just like, man, we're really rolling here.
Yeah, no doubt. And the thing about it too is like, I always try to remember, like in the NFL, you get 20 games, right? 3 in the preseason, 17 in the regular season. But there's not that many, not compared to hockey or baseball or basketball or whatever. And so, like, I never want to be, like, counting down the weeks until the season's over because, like, this is why you do it. Like, for the football games, like, it's the fun part. But also, at some point along the way, you are like, whoa, it gets long in a hurry.
Well, hopefully like a weekend like this where you have a few days here to sort of recharge the batteries a little bit. They call that the mini bye here. Hopefully that's a good chance to, get refocused for a good run here. And with the team, sitting at 4-3, that makes it a little more exciting, I'm sure, too.
Oh, I think so, yeah. And I mean, for those guys, one thing to work at a newspaper, it's like you're just trying to do a good job every day or whatever. But like for those guys, there's a huge difference, I would imagine, between going into one of the only times in the calendar they have 3 days off in a row between the end of July and January. So to go into that on a high note, and in this case with a dominant win, I'm sure it makes it a lot happier of a long weekend for players, coaches, staffers, whoever it is, if you're involved in the organization, than had you lost this game and been 3-4 and saying like, okay, what do we do now?
Yeah, especially with like 2 losses in a row, then you're sort of like, it's like bang bang. All of a sudden you go from 3-2, now you're obviously 3-4. That's a little bit different than getting a win and heading into it with on a high note here. Let's talk about the game a little bit, Parker. 33-10. The not even that close, really. What would you say stood out the most to you from that Broncos performance?
Well, they didn't score on their first possession. They started with the ball and they ended up punting, but 4 plays in, you're like, oh, well, sometimes the opening possession lies to you or whatever, but not usually. And right off the bat, you're like, it looks like Denver's going to be able to run the ball at will against this defense. And they did, obviously, 225 yards rushing. Both offensive touchdowns came on the ground. And so it just was one of those games where, I think you want to give Denver a lot of credit for what they did. Obviously, the Saints are just like beleaguered on the injury front, and they were missing Kalen Saunders too, which doesn't help defensively. But this is the Broncos dominated. They ran the ball whenever they wanted to. It was ups and downs with Bo Nix, but he made some plays too along the way, and so it was one of those nights where it was like it looks like they're going to be able to pick their number on the ground, and that's pretty much exactly what they did.
A few of the Broncos games this year have felt like that. Do you feel like that, Parker? Well, right off the bat, you're like, something's different about this team today versus like sometimes when it's like a quick 3 and out, you're like, uh-oh, this might be a long day.
Yeah, definitely. There's 2. You just think like they didn't score on their first possession last night, but this game and the Tampa game were the ones where you came out and you're like, well, it looks crisp, right? Bo Nix missed a couple of throws on the opening drive and sort of throughout the night. But overall, you're looking at it and saying, like, it's pretty obvious disposition-wise that they showed up here to handle business. And, some of that I'm sure is wanting to do it for Sean and the return to New Orleans and all that. But largely, I think it's also what we talked about. You're going into a long weekend. It's a short week. It's sort of a test of wills just because everybody's hurt, everybody's sore. And they just decided, hey, listen, we're going to come out and kick someone in the butt, and they followed through on it, which is pretty impressive.
For Sean during the week, of course, he's downplaying this thing, and saying it's just another game and all that. But, come to find out, like before the game, he's visiting with Drew. It's emotional going into the visiting locker room there. How much do you think that this win really meant for Sean Payton?
Oh, yeah. I talked to people throughout the week that said they thought there probably wasn't a regular season game in his career that he wanted more than this one. It's just kind of like, it's understandable, right? He spent 15 seasons coaching the Saints. It's his city and Drew's city in a lot of ways. It became that over their tenure here. And I think I thought it was interesting, Sean was downplaying it during the week, but he also was sort of slipping into talking about how the kids used to play flag football on the field after games and all that. Like, there was so much nostalgia. There were so many memories and all of that. And I think we got just like maybe 45 seconds last night of actual like retrospective Sean after the game. And one of the ways he framed it, and I wonder if this is sort of what he decided he was going to say, it felt to me closer to he was actually feeling this way, was that coming back to New Orleans and seeing all of those people and seeing sort of like the life that you used to have, also, I think, perhaps renewed his appreciation for what he has now and where he is now and what they're trying to build now, and that it doesn't just happen, and that it's going to be frustrating and it's going to be hard, and that it's not the same. And you just felt a little bit of that. Now, if it wouldn't have been 33-10, like maybe that would have been buried a little bit deeper. But it definitely seemed like it was there throughout the week, and then it peaked out a little bit after the game last night, I think.
Yeah, I thought that was like a really real moment when he was like, "I'm happy to be here." Like, yeah. He kind of like tagged that on to the end of an answer there, and I was like, "Oh, that was like a really real moment." It felt like, and you don't always get that from Sean.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I totally agree with you. And he told he even like when they beat the crap out of the Raiders a couple of weeks ago, the defense played great. He made no bones about it. It was a huge play and all that. And then now 2 weeks later, he's looking back on that Pat Surtain pick and saying, someday when he's, eating applesauce out of a straw, that he'll remember moments like that. And you're like, yeah, I mean, these guys put a lot into this. And I think Broncos fans will probably never feel the way about Sean Payton that Saints fans feel about him. And like, how could you? Like, he took the Saints to places they've never been before. It's just a fundamentally different relationship. It's a fundamentally different point in career arcs and also in franchise arcs. But at the same time, I think if they continue on this path where they sort of figure out who they are and they get it going, I think there will be sort of a deeper appreciation for, Sean from Broncos fans, and also probably of this stretch in Denver from Sean too.
Yeah, definitely. Even Sean's like legacy, to be able, if he's able to get this thing rolling here, to be able to do it in two places,
totally.
That would speak a lot to him being able to just have his thumbprint on successful teams. So I think that is a big deal. And, everything that Sean did in New Orleans after Katrina, felt like, that you mentioned it being sort of him and Drew City. I definitely agree with you there. What was the vibe like in New Orleans? Because I feel like from a Saints fan, like, you appreciate what he did, but at the same time, the ending there in New Orleans probably wasn't as smooth as like maybe you would hope for.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I think there was definitely like the people that I talked to down here, and again, it's mostly like former players, guys that were either around him or coached with him or whatever. And so I think fundamentally the appreciation is probably even higher among that group. But I think it's high overall, right? Like our columnist Troy Rank was down here on Wednesday morning talking to people, and most of them were like, yeah, we would take him back,
Yeah.
And that's easy to say too when we've lost 4 in a row, but I think there's an appreciation for him. The one thing that was interesting, and I didn't know if it was a big deal, not a big deal or whatever, but like I think it was very much Drew's night. From the Saints, like from the game day presentation perspective, it was not Drew's back and we're honoring him and also Sean's back. It was, this is Drew Brees' Hall of Fame induction night. And then it was this sort of like happy coincidence in terms of presentation mode that like his former coach got to be there for it. Like there was no acknowledgement of Sean. There was no video. They didn't show him on the Jumbotron. There was none of that. It was Drew's night and the Saints were playing the Broncos. And like, to me, that's a fine way to do it. It did seem like we were sort of like watching, like, are they gonna show him? Are they gonna do any sort of tribute for him? There was none of that. And it was, I'm not saying it was scandalous or anything, but I guess it was noticeable.
Yeah, that is interesting. You would have thought maybe they would have done something, but just a weird mix of balance there with it being Drew's night. I heard that Drew Brees actually picked this game. He wanted Sean in the building, I guess. So, sort of a weird night. But you would think, like, I thought back to, like Peyton Manning returning to Indianapolis that first time, and they played like a huge tribute video for him. And I feel like that affected him a little bit just because it was so emotional, Maybe even like to help the Saints, you would try to like get Sean, get his emotions going a little before the game, but I guess they're moving on.
Yeah, I suppose so. And it was funny because Sean actually he was asked about the Peyton Manning thing this week, and he was like, "Oh, that's pretty clever by the Colts." And so maybe he had like steeled himself for the star, the teary-eyed video. But I think all the people involved directly, it was a pretty warm reception. Like before the game, it's interesting because he's you've seen him, Phil. He's so locked in. It looks like if you were to accidentally make eye contact with him before a game, you might like be vaporized or something.
Yeah.
And he had that glare. He walked out there, cameras all around him, and I was like, man, he's gonna he looks perturbed in a way. And he walked all the way down the visiting sideline, and then it was like he just went and he just changed. He softened up, he stepped over the rail, and then his family was there and Drew was there, and he was like smiling and high fives and fist bumps. This is 20 minutes before the game. And then he came out and he gave Gail Benson, the Saints owner, a big hug, kiss on the cheek, long, warm embrace. Like it was very much, there was no ill will from like the principals involved. There just also was no public acknowledgement of like, hey, everybody in the Superdome, Sean's back. What do you think?
Yeah. Makes sense. And you did seem like some warm embraces after the game there. I mean, he
Oh yeah.
Cam Jordan, long, catch up with Alvin Kamara after the game. So you could feel that there was some serious love there, and it was legit. Let's talk a little bit about Bo here, Parker. We saw him use his legs a lot against the Saints. 10 runs, 75 yards on the ground there. You feel like this is something they're going to allow him to do more and more of, because those first few games, everybody was saying, okay, you got to do it from the pocket. It feels like a sort of a double-edged sword. It's a weapon he can use, but you don't want him to take unnecessary hits.
Yeah, definitely. And I think actually, I mean, he took maybe a couple last night, but overall, one of the things that he's shown is the ability to avoid taking a lot of big hits. I can't think of all that many times where he's really been squared up or he didn't slide. I mean, occasionally he put his shoulder down a couple times last night, but like most of the time he's sliding, he's getting out of bounds. And so that's good. You need that. But I think also they need to lean into him in the run game as a weapon a little bit. One of the things that we've wondered about him in the passing game is just, can they be efficient enough down the field to loosen up defenses so that he can play the underneath game that really, I mean, Phil, like that's become a lot of the game in the NFL. You're not seeing a laser show 40 yards down the field all the time, but you have to have that threat in order to play efficient, underneath and in the intermediate. And so like one of the questions has been, can they do that enough? And they haven't been able to do that through the passing game. But what I wonder is, perhaps it's actually Bo's legs that will loosen defenses, going forward. That, Sean said New Orleans played more zone than we thought, probably to keep eyes on Bo. And if they can impose that on defenses, we have to play a little bit softer. We have to play more zone, because if we play man, this guy's going to beat us with his legs. What's the difference between that and saying we have to play zone because they can push the ball down the field? There is none. Like if you can get them in the defense you want them in, you can make it work. And so to me, it's like, I don't think they can have him carry the ball 15 times a game, but I think he has to be enough of the run game plan that teams have to account for him. Because right now, that and the ability to play without getting sacked and without turning the ball over, like those are his strengths at this point. He doesn't turn the ball over. He doesn't take unnecessary sacks. He can extend plays, and he's a dynamic athlete. That's not what they want the finish line to be, but that's what it looks like right now.
Yeah, like you have to like have some threat there, like you have to like make the defense worry about something,
Something, yes.
And if it's not going to be those deep balls, the laser show, if the legs are that, then hey, like we got to utilize that. It feels like, and that just makes the defense think, twice before they do something. Hey, make sure you're alert to Bo's legs here. I agree. And I was going to ask you, what do you think that Bo has improved on the most from like week one, out there in Seattle, to what we saw against the Saints? Where do you think he's come the furthest?
Yeah, I think it's probably in that. I mean, he obviously, it's not like he got a lot more athletic or faster or whatever in the last 7 weeks, but one of the things that he got a little bit caught in between against the Chargers especially was it went back into like a little bit more of the runaround, and then try to do something. And I think one of the things he's getting better at is picking his spots to be decisive about running the ball. Like, okay, it's not there, boom, 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 go. I think even maybe the first play of the game was one of those where it was like, you look, you don't like it, you take off, you get 15 yards. I mean, that's a good way to go. And so they have a long way to go in the passing game. I mean, there's not a lot of stuff that you look at and say like, yes, consistently they're doing this very well. I mean, there's stuff that he obviously likes. He likes throwing the dagger, and they've hit a bunch of big plays on that. And he's also thrown 3 or 4 of them in the dirt. So like, we're not really at a point where a lot of the stuff through the air is like, we know they can do this and we know they can do it 95% of the time they want to do it. But I think you have to learn how do you work around those inconsistencies early on. And one of the things I give him a lot of credit for is that he stays in the fight. He keeps going. He doesn't seem to let it, affect him for more than a little while. And they're sort of like figuring out ways around it. So it's not always pretty, but they're 4-3, and that's a good way to be figuring it out rather than being 2-5.
Yeah, like there are times when that offense is out there and it's just like no rhythm at all. It's like three and out, three and out, three and out. Time of possession is like a disaster. You're like, hey, if he just used his legs a little bit more here, move the chains, then maybe you could sort of work through some of these things once in a while. Don't just rely on your arm. Like you meant, like that pass where the ball dropped in between two wide open guys, that got a lot of play, certainly on social media. I'm wondering, in your opinion, do you think that those are things that Bo can correct at this point just because he's played so much college football? Do you think some of those mechanical issues, those are things that he can continue to work on and improve?
Yeah, definitely. I do. I mean, and I don't think like I don't really know what the ceiling is. I don't think any of us do. And I don't. I said this before the draft and before the season started. So this is not like, oh, you're making grand proclamations off 7 games. No, I think the question with Bo has always been, because of the experience, because he's a little bit older, like whatever he is after a year or 2 years, like can he go 3 levels higher than that? And that we don't know that about any quarterback. And I think you just have the added layer of question just because of what Bo's profile was coming out of Oregon and Auburn. But I will say, like, there are some things where he hasn't played from under center and play faked and turned his back to the defense and then turned back and set up shop and scanned the defense from that perspective much in his career. So I think you want to give him quite a bit of time to show that either he just can't learn how to do that, or yes, he can, and he can get better at it. And so there's a lot of stuff like, the footwork, the timing and footwork of Sean's offense is very intricate. It's very detailed, and it matters a lot. All of the timing is predicated on the footwork. And so even if he never became a master of it, if he just became pretty good at it, I think there's quite a bit of room for growth still. And I think it's fair to say that it's looked rough at times over the first 7 games, and also say that doesn't mean that he's destined to always look rough just because the first 7 games of his career were that way.
Yeah, and I would say, like with any rookie quarterback, you expect ups and downs, and that's exactly what the Broncos have gotten. You've gotten some really good high moments there. That Tampa game, certainly the second half against the Raiders, some of that stuff in the fourth quarter against the Chargers. You're like you can see some of the high moments, and then some of it has looked rough, and that's sort of what you would expect. I'm curious, what do you think? And this might be hard to answer, but like at the end of the year, if you look back on what Bo's able to accomplish, what would be successful there for him? Just because, when I look at this Broncos offense, like there's Cortland Sutton, who's making some incredible catches out there, and he's a dynamic playmaker, but aside from him, you're like, okay, there's not a huge threat there, with a bunch of other guys. So, knowing that, what do you think would be successful where at the end of the year, you're like, that was like a really good rookie season here for Bo?
Yeah, I mean, I think like obviously outside of just like team goals, I think individually you'd like to see some of the footwork stuff and some of the calmness start to pop in. Like I'll be surprised if there's a stretch of 4 games at the end of the year where it's like, oh yeah, he's got it down. I mean, it's just hard, and it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of reps. And so, you want to see him get better from where he's at right now to week 18. But I would be surprised and obviously very impressed if there was like a full transformation over the next 10 weeks. But I think it's that. I think it's showing the ability to be a little bit more dynamic and a little bit calmer in the passing game. And then I think the key is like, regardless of what, Cortland Sutton or some of the more veteran guys, like whatever their long-term outlook is and whatever gets decided after the season, like if you can look at Bo Nix and Troy Franklin and Devon Vele and say, yep, I'm not sure if either one of those receivers is a number 1 in the future, but they're both guys that can play here for quite a while and that Bo can build a rhythm with over time, like that's probably what you're looking for at this point, right? Like let's see Bo with a couple guys who he's really comfortable with, a couple of the young guys that he's really comfortable with, and sort of set a little bit of a foundation of like, it's not everything, it's not all the pieces. They need more talent, and Bo has a lot of development to do, but the building blocks that are here now, they look like something we can work with in a real way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point there, because you want like all your guys to be sort of on that same level and grow up together,
Yep.
like
Yep.
you don't want like a few superstars out there and then Bo, like we saw that a little after like Super Bowl 50, like there was, DT and Emmanuel Sanders and then like Trevor Siemian, and you're like, okay, there's like sort of you're not like growing at the same time, where at some point a few years from now, this offense might be really good, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So like, I think that's a really good point. And, it's a sort of a balance, it feels like, Parker, where like he's going to continue to grow, but then there's going to be more tape on him and defenses will know how to like game plan for him. So like it's just sort of a give and take. And the other thing I think is that it's such a week to week league that like after the Chargers game you're like, this is a disaster. After the Saints game you're like, okay, now he's back on track. So like it's just such an emotional roller coaster if you let it be. So you don't want it to be that. So want to ask you about the defense here, because it seems like week after week here they're so aggressive. They're making like game-changing plays or like game-finishing type of plays, and they're doing it with, last against the Saints, like without PS2, and even when he is out there, he's the only first-rounder out there.
Yeah.
So how is Vance doing this with that side of the ball?
Yeah, they just have built, I think, like sort of surprisingly, or maybe they did it in an under the radar way, but they've just built like really solid depth pretty much across the board. I mean, they're like, Pat can't, is out. He's got the concussion, and obviously like it affected them big time against the Chargers. Last night they're playing. It's like Levi Wallace. Yeah, he looks fine. He's out there. He's out there playing. Alex Singleton's out for the year. It's like, Cody Barton and Quan Alexander out there playing. They're fine. Cody Barton forces a fumble that Quan Alexander recovers. Cody Barton has a defensive touchdown taken off the board by an offside penalty. Then he scores another one later in the game, and it really has, like, I wrote a big story about the secondary a week ago, and like they've done a really good job. I think they're really talented. Like Pat, when Pat's healthy, Pat, Riley Moss, and Jaquan McMillan, like I just don't think you probably find a lot of trios playing at a higher level than those three, corner, nickel across the NFL. But then simultaneously, John Franklin Myers, I think, changed the whole equation of the front group. He and Malcolm Roach are such upgrades. It's nothing against the guys that were here last year, but like they are such upgrades over what they were playing with last year next to Zach Allen and DJ Jones, that it has just turned maybe the single biggest weakness on the roster last year into one of the biggest strengths. And you see it. You see it in the way those guys pressure the quarterback, in the way the edge guys now are pressuring the quarterback. Those guys are growing. Nick Benito and Jonathan Cooper, like they're growing as players, but they didn't go from guys that are okay to 12 sack a year guys just like overnight. The defensive line has made a big difference in helping that group come along too. And so it's really been, they just don't have many weak links on defense. And when you can play that way, the sum is greater than, the total is greater than the sum of the parts kind of thing.
Yeah, like they're making plays, and you're like, oh, hold on a second, I got to check my roster. Like, who is this out there? That? It does feel like that at times. And yeah, I mean, they're playing with like such a mentality too that's just like so aggressive. Like McMillan made a few tackles last night. I was like, whoa, man, they're like flying to the ball. They're playing the right way, and it's been leading to these like PS2, that pick six, like changed the whole course of that game. Last night, Barton's play sort of sealed the deal, if it wasn't already done. But it just seems like they're just playing with a mindset that like, hey, we're legit.
Where
do they get that confidence from? I guess.
I think it stems from coaching, right? Like I think it stems from Vance. Like I was talking to PJ Locke about this in the locker room last week, maybe. That so the first play of the game against the Jets, they brought 7. Vance emptied the tank, said we're going to get this guy. Both inside linebackers, they blitzed 7, and they left the 4 guys behind in zero coverage, no help, man to man across the board against Aaron Rodgers. And I was talking to PJ about that, and he said when that call came in, I can't probably say this is a family friendly podcast, I would imagine, but he. But he said the call came in, I heard it, and I was like, holy, Yeah. And he was like, okay, we're doing this. And that's the way that you call a game and the way that you instill confidence in players by, sometimes almost maybe borderline reckless of like, it's always with a plan, but it's like when you feel like you can leave your guys with no help in the back end just because you have that level of trust in them, then that engenders trust. And then when you succeed in that, it builds and it builds and it builds. And so that's sort of where they're at right now. They feel like they can play anything. Vance feels like he can call anything. And when you hit on that more often than you fail on that, you have this sense of, hey, whatever comes in, we're going all out on it. And so far, for the most part, it's working.
Yeah, it has been working great. One more thing on the Broncos here, and then we'll move on here. But we're sort of at the halfway-ish point. I mean, 7 games in, 10 to go here. Have they surprised you with anything through the first 7 games here? And what do you think the ceiling is for this team? Like, I know it's hard to sort of predict there, but if you could look into your crystal ball, where do you think this thing's heading for the Broncos? Because, we mentioned it being a week-to-week thing, but it does feel like there's a lot of excitement around town about this team and, like, what could possibly happen here over the next couple of months.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the thing that surprised me, honestly, is the defense. Like, I think you looked at the pieces and you thought, okay, they have a chance to be good, but you just never know in camp. Like, you really don't. It's hard to tell fully. And then also because of, Brandon Jones missed most of camp because of the hamstring injury. They slow played JFM and Zach Allen a little bit, and you just don't. I think looking back, the way that they played in the joint practice against the Packers was a little bit of a harbinger. It was like, ooh, that's a good offense, and they were in the Packers' grill the whole day. And that turns out that's sort of the mentality that now they've had through the first part of the season. So to me, just the way that they've been among the best defenses in the NFL, I thought they had a chance to be good. I did not see this coming. It's been very impressive. And that's also why I think if you're looking at sort of outlook from here, that they have a chance to be in the postseason mix. I mean, if you're at 500 or above, or even a game under, at any given point in the calendar, like for the most part, you're in it. And so they have a little bit of a break here. They've got Carolina. If you get that game and get to 5-3, there's no reason to not be thinking about the postseason. And then you have a brutal stretch after that, right? Like back-to-back on the road, Baltimore and Kansas City, and then Atlanta at home and Vegas on the road. Like November is a brute. But if they're 5-3, going into that stretch, there is no reason not to think about the wild card. There are games on the schedule that are any game's winnable, any game's losable in the NFL. So I think I didn't think this before the season, but there's no denying it at this point. Like, for as flawed as they are at times offensively, they have some upward mobility there. And that combined with the way they're playing on defense means, there's no reason for them not to think, hey, we're going to be in the mix the whole way.
Wow, awesome. Okay, good to hear that. And yeah, I do think that we'll know a lot more about this team when we're having our Thanksgiving turkey. We'll know a lot more about them, Parker, here.
Tell me what time to be there.
Hey, we'll have you over. Hey, we're ready to go. Okay, let's do a few about you here to get to know you a little bit better. We call this Phil's Five. Okay.
Right on.
You're from Wisconsin. Who's your favorite player growing up?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I grew up watching Brett Favre and then Aaron Rodgers. So that was my whole childhood. Like my foremost football memories would be watching Brett Favre play for the Packers and Darrell Bevell, everybody's favorite offensive coordinator, running the show for Wisconsin in the early 90s. So those are my formative football players, and Michael Jordan in hoops, obviously.
Of course, yeah, of course. Okay, who was your favorite journalist growing up? Was there a guy like you always like sort of like not like a mentor, but somebody that you just loved to read all the time?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton. In Wisconsin, I always read Bob McGinn from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, the late Tom Mulhern at the Wisconsin State Journal. Not only did a great job covering Wisconsin, but then like when I got to college, he was still on the beat, and he just like covering Wisconsin football for the student newspaper, and getting to watch Tom Mulhern. Tom Oates was a columnist there. Jeff Petrikis worked for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, just retired a few months ago. Like, having the ability, like, you learn a lot doing the job, but then like the ability to watch people do the job for real, I think you just soak up a lot of that. And so when I was a kid, I couldn't, you can't like hold the newspaper all the way open. So I would put it on the ground, and then I would lay on floor in our house, and I would like read the sports section, like from laying down. So always those guys. And then there's we could talk about this for quite a while, but Wright Thompson, like there's nobody that does it better sports wise than Wright Thompson. And so there was stuff I read of his in college where I was just like, how do you do that? Chris Jones used to write for Esquire, like Wright Thompson, Chris Jones, some of these guys that did the long form stuff. You would read them and be like, I'll never be able to put words together like that, but it makes me want to like at least maybe try,
Yeah. That's an inspiration. Yeah. No, that's awesome.
Totally.
So you knew you wanted to do this from a very early age.
I had interest in it from a young age. I didn't know for sure. I came like 5 weeks probably from going to law school. And so I was a journalism major. I worked for the student newspaper. I also was political science. I thought about going to law school. I thought about doing a bunch of different stuff. I actually didn't. I mean, I worked at the Wisconsin State Pension Fund for a couple years after I graduated from college. And so there was no guarantee, but I always had I was blogging like for a friend, and I covering Wisconsin hoops, and it turned out that it was one of those years, 14 or 15, when they went to the Final Four. And every time I would go over to I'd like get done with my actual job, and I would go. My apartment was through the parking lot from the Kohl Center, and I would go to the Kohl Center and just like cover hoops for free just to do it. I thought it was like, I'll just scratch the itch, and instead I like kept doing it, and I just kept thinking like, no, this isn't scratching the itch really. This is just like I sort of feel like this is I want to try to figure out a way to actually do this. And so 10 years later, we're still going.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just like some magic there, and you're like, this is special, and you get that feeling. The next one here is who's your favorite player to cover? Like I know you've covered a lot of different teams here. Your favorite player to cover?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see. I think I always like covering offensive linemen because most of the time they're among the smartest guys on the team. Like when I covered Wisconsin in college, there was it was like Travis Frederick, who ended up playing for a long time for the Cowboys, was an electrical engineer, and you talk to him every week, and he would be like comparing football to circuits. He's like, you know how this sort of circuit works? And I was like, no, I don't, and then you like learn something, and then you also talk football. On the current Broncos team, there's a bunch of guys that are really enjoyable to cover. I think Alex Singleton is one of them. He was at Montana State when my first newspaper job was at the Bozeman Daily Chronicle in 2014. I guess I got out there, and Alex was on the team out there, and so. That's one where you have a little bit of scope where it's like, you saw him as a college player. You saw him as a guy who wanted a chance at the NFL and didn't get it and ended up in the CFL and just kept playing and never complained about it. Loved it. I got the job. I got a job in Nebraska right before, college basketball teams do the like big glitzy foreign tours. Mm-hmm. Montana State's foreign tour was to take a bus up to Calgary. From Bozeman.
A little different than Italy. Yeah.
A little bit different, yeah. And Alex was playing for the Stampeders in the CFL, and I was going to go up there and cover the foreign tour for Montana State. But I got a job in Nebraska to cover the Cornhuskers in the Big Ten, and he was so mad. He was like, "You're really not going to come to Calgary and watch these Montana State games with me? I'm going to watch the Bobcats. You're not going to be there." And so like to see like going from that to being like a real player and getting a multi-year contract in the NFL. Like those are the kind of stories that are all over the place in the NFL and that are really cool because it's guys that have worked so hard and, they may not get a $100 million contract, but they're able to set themselves up. And like when you see guys make that work, like that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome. And just when you've known him and followed his journey like that from such a young point, that's awesome. That's a great story. Do you have a most memorable interview? Like, have you ever been in a scrum or doing something one-on-one where it's sort of taken a different direction than you were anticipating?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think if you want to go like different direction than anticipating, there weren't many more like stunned looks in the group than in London when Russell just like volunteered that he was doing high knees on the plane. Like it was as if
What?
everybody on the field at that moment recognized that was like a viral moment that was just like about to take over. Even though it was probably like 5 a.m. in the U.S. or whatever when it happened. But that was one. I think like, and then you learn stuff too. Like I don't know. Yeah, there was another offensive lineman at Wisconsin, John Moffitt. He was asked on senior day if he liked his offensive line coach, Bob Bosted, who was like a very intense guy, ended up coaching for the Titans for a while. And he was like, do I like him? And he was like, well, I don't know. What's one more cattail in the whip? Not really, but he's taught me a lot, and it was just sort of like one of those where every once in a while when you get a very candid moment, it's memorable because you're like, oh yeah, I like this is good. This will play well.
It sticks out, yeah, for sure. It's interesting you mentioned these offensive linemen. Like you see, like all these former Broncos linemen, they're like now in the media.
Yeah.
Like Mark Schlereth or Tyler Columbus or Orlando Franklin. Like the list goes on and on. Where these guys just like they know football so well, but you don't like think of them that way that they would like transition to media, but they all do it. Last one for the Phil's Five here. What's an event that you haven't covered yet that you really hope to someday?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I've never covered a Super Bowl. That would be pretty cool. I've covered a Stanley Cup. It's funny. I cover the NFL. That's my job. I've covered the Stanley Cup Finals. I've covered the NBA Finals. I've not covered a postseason football game. So that would be a good one. I mean, I just think it would be so cool. There's a lot of stuff that would be cool that probably not going to happen at this point. Like, I think it would be cool to cover Formula One. It's such a global sport. Some of the World Cup stuff in 26 would be amazing. The Olympics, obviously. But yeah, a little closer to home, like in terms of my actual job duties. I've got two of the big four checked off. So if I could get a Super Bowl and cover a World Series game someday, yeah, I would be pretty happy with that.
Okay, maybe we'll get the playoffs. That one checked maybe hopefully pretty soon here, and then maybe use the Lewis Hamilton angle here and get into some F1 or something.
We're trying to have that be in the works for Vegas.
Okay.
The Broncos play in Las Vegas the day after that race there. So getting a credential for a Formula One race is not easy.
I can imagine those pre-race, like where you're just like walking through the gallery there, like that would be pretty awesome. So I imagine they don't just let anybody in there.
They don't. We're trying to figure it out, but we'll have to see about that.
Okay. Well, you might be knocking out a couple here this year.
Sure.
So that would be awesome. Okay. And then the last one for you here, Parker, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but we kind of touched on this a little bit. What's some career advice that you would give to somebody who's just starting out? They want to be a sports reporter. What do they need to do?
Yeah, I think one thing is like the more you read, the better a writer you become. And I think like in terms of writing itself, you want to write in your own voice. Like if you are trying to sound like somebody else, or if you're trying to sound smart or whatever, like it's not going to work. You have to, whether you're on television, whether you're on the radio, whether you're writing, the more that you are you, I think the more authentic you're going to be, the more clear you're going to communicate whatever your medium for communicating is. So those are a couple things. And then the other thing is just like do whatever you can do. Like I covered Montana State football and basketball as my first job, but I also covered trail running and high school sports and all of that. And that stuff is so much harder to do and do well than it is to like go cover an NFL game and ask questions after the game. Like it's harder to keep your own stats in the snow at a high school football game than it is to do almost anything else in sports reporting. So like you just do everything you're asked to do more than you're asked to do, and be a team player. And if you do all of those things and you work hard, then that doesn't like guarantee, but that's the only way, like over the long run, that opportunities are going to come your way. And in a business where there are fewer and fewer opportunities rather than more and more, you have to figure out like one of those is like some people are just so good, it's undeniable. It's like, yes, you have to hire them. But for me, for a lot of people, it has to be that you work hard and then you get lucky at some point along the way. And the more luck, like in anything, more luck is going to come your way if you work at it and if you are willing to, be there and be in the right spot as often as possible. Then eventually, hopefully something good happens.
Awesome. Hey, that's tremendous advice. I think that speaks to any kind of field you're in.
Totally.
That's really great advice. So appreciate it, Parker. Really appreciate your insight here on this Broncos team. I mean, nobody's closer to the team than you are every single day covering the squad. So really appreciate your time, and I hope that you get a chance to recharge the batteries a little bit this weekend.
Yeah, thanks. It's going to be awesome. Thanks for having me, Phil.
My thanks to Parker Gabriel. There's some really good insight on how the Broncos came out with that 33-10 win. I know that meant a lot to Sean Payton. I think that sometimes when you're not around these guys, you kind of forget how competitive they are and like what really drives them. Because hey, it's a short week. You're traveling on a Wednesday, heading to New Orleans, playing on a short turnaround. A lot of long nights there, coming up with that game plan and. What really drives them is this competitiveness and, to be able to go back to New Orleans and win like that. I know that meant a lot to him there. And I agree with Parker here with Bo using his legs. Got to do more of it. I think that especially when that offense isn't rolling, him taking off is a legitimate threat. 10 carries for 75 yards. You don't want your quarterback being like your second leading rusher like the Broncos necessarily have, but I think that because it's such a weapon, it really forces defenses to adjust how they're playing. And hey, why not use it? He's young. He's able to do it, and he's being smart about it. He's getting down. And then, hey, the ceiling for this team this year, why not start thinking about the playoffs right now? I mean, when you're around 500 in this league, you can get in, but I also think that it's important to not get ahead of yourself and think like, okay, they beat this Saints team that was really injured, really reeling there, and now all of a sudden this team's really good again. It's still the same Broncos team. You just can't ride that roller coaster every single week. Still the same Broncos team, but they played really well, and we know what this team's capable of. Now you got to do it every single week, and you got to do it against some quality opponents. And coming up here after this mini bye, you got Carolina. If you're able to get that win, then you're going to find out some more about this Broncos team. Ravens and Chiefs, that's going to be some really good games here. And if the Broncos want to be in the playoff mix, you got to be able to beat teams like that. So really exciting here and a great time for this Broncos team because you got a young quarterback who's able to win games on the road like this, and that's definitely a good sign. So my thanks again there to Parker Gabriel. Let's get into some of these bourbon reviews here, okay? I'm going to rank the 6 that we've done so far, and we'll start with number 6 here. For me, that is the Larceny small batch here. Now, I can't really describe this, but after I had a couple of these, like I felt like a little indigestion. Like, I don't know, maybe it was the spice level. I'm not sure. Maybe it was the wheated. This has a high wheat mash bill here. So this one I'm going to go with number 6. Obviously, it's still like a good bourbon for the price point. All these bourbons are like sort of in that 30 or less, 40 or less sort of range here. So this one, I'm going to have to go with number 6, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that one. So bear with me. Okay, number 5, I'm going to go with 1792 small batch. As you can tell, I've enjoyed a lot of this one, but I just think like the complexity isn't like it's not super complex. And I'm just this one is number 5 for me, okay? Number 4, Old Granddad 114. This one, the more I drink this, the more I've enjoyed this like after dinner. Like there's sort of like a cinnamony, like or like sort of like the spice is like, this would be like really nice like this time of year, fall. The temperature is starting to get a little bit cooler. This one's a nice one like for after dinner, like a true nightcap. But I have enjoyed Old Granddad 114. Number 3, I'm going to go with the Redemption High Rye Bourbon. I've been actually drinking this one neat. And It's just a 92 proof, so I've enjoyed this one neat. High rye on this one, and I've really enjoyed this. I do kind of like the more rye types of bourbons here, so I've enjoyed that. That's number 3. Number 2, Knob Creek 9. I really enjoyed this one. 100 proof, aged 9 years, and I do enjoy. I'm a big fan of Knob Creek here. So this is the Jim Beam from Jim Beam, and I do enjoy Knob Creek 9. And then my favorite so far has been this Four Roses single barrel. Go figure, this has been the most expensive bottle. It's the first bottle that we started with on the show week 1, and this is definitely the best one so far. So like if you're looking for a little bit of a treat this weekend, go with a Four Roses single barrel. You're getting apricot, pear, cinnamon, toasted oak, some rye spice, and this is a heck of a bourbon here. So I appreciate all of the feedback I've been getting here on in the comment section. I got feedback here to try a Woodford, a special Woodford batch, and I'll be trying that. I'll go out and get that. I've been suggested to go out and get some brandy. Maybe around the holidays I'll get to that. And the next couple of weeks here, I think that I'll be trying a Basil Hayden. That might be next week in case you want to try with me here. Basil Hayden will be next week. And then the week after that, we'll do Russell's Reserve 10. That'll be the bourbon after that. So if you want to taste along with me, those are the 2 that are coming up next. Really appreciate you guys checking out the show. If you like it, like and subscribe, please. Not being paid to review any of these bourbons here. I've just been out selecting them, and I hope that you appreciate some of the honest feedback here. And, I hope that you're enjoying the program. Let me know. Is there something that, hey, I haven't been asking these guys that you're interested in? Let me know. I'm really all about building this community here. I'm active in the comment section. I really just sort of enjoy building this here and just talking Broncos. Hey, this team is certainly doing better than I thought. I'll be honest about that. 4-3 at this point with the rookie quarterback, and some of the injuries that they've gone through, I think has been tremendous. Speaks to the coaching, and I've been enjoying the ride so far. So enjoying chatting with you every single week and talking with my guests. Thanks again to Parker Gabriel here this week. So if you're enjoying the program, please like and subscribe. We'll be back again next Friday with more of a normal show here as the Broncos get set to face the Carolina Panthers. That's going to do it for us. I am Phil Milani. Thank you so much for checking out Broncos and Bourbon.